So I have a tendency to make some videos about Jordan Peterson, and it's for a few reasons. Number one, he is very dumb. He is one of those incredibly dumb people that sounds very, very smart, when in fact he is water-brained. Used to be smart, now very dumb. The other is it's very relevant because he tends to talk about trending things because he is sharking for clout, which is very true. But also number three is because when I make these videos on my second channel about Jordan Peterson, they somehow seem to always end up in the algorithm after people watch Jordan Peterson videos, which is very funny to me, and it makes people very mad. But like, I'm putting it out there. When I watch these things and I'm criticizing him, if you're really a Jordan Peterson fan, you should probably actually listen to the content of what I'm saying and analyze it rather than just simply assume that you should always agree with Jordan. Now, in this one, Jordan is talking to Stephanie Davies-Arai, who is a TERF. If you are upset by me using those terms, I don't care. Get over yourself, snowflake. This is Jordan Peterson's thoughts on gender identity. Let's go.
The things that really strikes me as odd as a psychologist, there's two things, I suppose, when I look at modern claims about identity. The first is that identity is subjectively defined. I think that is so utterly preposterous. I can't believe that we're even entertaining it as a culture. It's
Identity is subjectively defined. You have a problem with us saying that that identity is subjectively defined. Why? Lots of things are subjectively defined. Like, you can't be like, I like this Marvel movie and it is objectively good. It is a subjective taste. If something as benign as like a taste in movies can be subjective, the only way that somebody internalizes their sense of self that's preposterous to you. I don't understand how that makes any sense. That is very strange to me.
So idiotic. Every single time I have a conversation with my wife, or with anyone else for that matter, but let's say with my wife, I'm negotiating my identity, just as she's negotiating hers, because we have our viewpoints and our proclivities for action, and we have each of us have our tendency to insist that our way is the right way. But if you're going to be around other people,
it's weird the language that uses to insist that our way is the right way. It's very strange that every conversation has to be an insistence. Do you ever go seeking for advice? Like, this is very strange. If identity were objective, none of us could change. Exactly. Yeah. Here, let's keep going.
But if you're going to be around other people, you have to constantly negotiate that so that you can stand each other. And so
what a pessimistic way of viewing like interactions with people. Like, you have to negotiate in order to be able to even stand another human being. Weird.
Real identity is actually the ability to negotiate the transformation of your own identity in a social space. It has nothing to do with you subjectively defining your identity.
That is horrendously incorrect. And just on the basic terms of like psychology, what Jordan is trying to paint as an identity is somebody's demeanor. Like, that's what the word is. The word is demeanor. Identity is a big encompassing scope of sense of self, whereas demeanor is how you negotiate yourself outwardly into the world. Like, I don't even understand how he doesn't understand this. This is so crazy. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, if you're going to argue something, and by arguing it, you change what it means to something very narrow and specific, you're not arguing that anymore, and your point is invalid. This is so weird.
So that's, now, as far as I can tell, the only people who are unable to negotiate identity and who insist upon having it subjectively defined are literally 2 years old. Because according to Piaget, and there's some good research support for the basic outlines of his theory, two-year-olds are too egocentric to negotiate a shared play space.
What are you talking about? Okay, so he's citing a psychologist using psychology terms to explain why little babies are not able to like morph and change demeanor, and it's because they're too egocentric. It also could be that their brains aren't fully formed. Newborn babies are you can even argue through neuroscience are not even conscious, not really conscious. They're almost completely primal in so many ways. Like it's because the brain is still developing. Like the skull isn't even fused together. Like you know this, right? But like if you want to paint in like they're just too egocentric and immersed in their sense of self. What sense of self? This is so dumb.
So their identity is subjectively defined, and they're almost entirely hedonistically oriented, which means they run by whim.
Okay, hang on. More wrong words. Hedonism is a pursuit of pleasure, sensual self-indulgence. Babies are not hedonistic. Babies do not have a sense of pleasure further than their needs being met. One of the reasons why babies cry so hard, and like even just a little bit older than babies, why they cry so hard when something happens, that's the first time they've experienced that. It's terrifying to them. They have no frame of reference. The first time a kid stubs its toe, that is the worst stub toe that kid will ever experience because it has no frame of reference. To then paint that simply as like hedonism is so insane to me. This is so crazy. I'm only a minute and 37 seconds into this video, and every single thing he said is objectively wrong and makes no coherent sense whatsoever. Yeah, like what? Babies out here trying to get to milkies. Yeah, like this is so dumb. I cannot believe people actually think this person has anything of value to say anymore. This is so wild.
Which everyone knows if you're around two-year-olds. And they can't play with other children. Okay, so the idea that identity is subjectively defined is utterly preposterous. And it's
How did you even demonstrate that? That makes no sense. You didn't even talk about identity. You talked about demeanor. And then you brought up babies.
actually an anti-truth, because if you try to define your identity subjectively, you are a bloody tyrant, and you're going to be an unpopular one too, and you deserve it. But then, secondarily, we have this other...
What the I don't even know what he's trying to say with this. I have no idea. Having a sense of self that is defined purely on your own subjective tastes or how you intrinsically feel on the inside, which is subjective to you because somebody could also have similar experiences and not feel that way, makes you a tyrant.
Weird insistence, and I don't know why we've become so demented that we also accept this, that your identity is subjectively defined, but nonetheless, the core element of your identity is some immutable group characteristic, and the one we stress most is sexual attraction.
Okay. I don't think anybody necessarily when somebody says, you know, I was born this way, you know, of if they're gay or they're bi or pan or straight or whatever, when saying that is not necessarily to imply that these are immutable characteristics. Now, what I mean by that, and that can sound very like, whoa, what do you mean? Is in the discovery of oneself and experiencing the world, there can be other factors that you can discover that are more important to you. Just can. You can go your entire life believing that you are straight or that you are gay or asexual. And the right kind of circumstances, the right kind of person comes along that challenges that. And then it's basically an interface between that external factor and your own internal subjective sense of self and identity, and how that correlates to whether or not a change will happen. And that's really what it comes down to. If you think of attraction and sexual orientation purely as like an adherence to your attraction to genitals, then yes, maybe what he's talking about makes sense. But that's dumb. That's dumb. That is a dumb thing to even consider. It's weird.
And I suppose the secondary one is something like race. It's like it's so peculiar that
Race is different. That's race has nothing to do with your brain, with like how your subjective like sense of identity apart from your what's the easiest way to say this? Gene expression on an outward physical scale, okay? These are different things. They are different. And trying to equate like your sexual orientation and your race is also very dumb.
That your identity is subjectively defined, but it's also boxed into this very narrow set of parameters, which is, well, the most important thing about you is to whom and to what degree are you sexually attracted? Like it just leaves me speechless. Well, it doesn't, but you get my point.
We wish it did. And also, you're wrong, because that is not main core central identity aspects of people. I can explain why it is so important right now, but that would require Jordan to understand that when you have an aspect of yourself that is overwhelmingly under attack or despised, or you're castigated in society because of it, it becomes a lot more important, because that's why people hate you. That's why. That's entirely why. It's not that it has to be. And if Jordan had the ability to self-examine any of this, especially through a historical lens looking back throughout the years, he would understand this. It's only a big deal. Like, gay people, we'll water this down a little bit to make it easier to understand. Gay people making being gay a part of their everyday identity that they express and harness and feel about strongly would not be as big of a deal if there wasn't so many people in the world that hated them because that they were gay. That's it. That's it. That's the whole purpose. That's the whole reason. It's a reaction that this is very important because somebody hates me because of it. Why do they hate me because of it? Is there something wrong with me? No, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just people are bigoted. That's it. And this cause and effect is lost on so many people, and they don't understand that.
So I think what we're seeing is this idea of subjective identity taken to its absolute extreme. Because you're right, you know, up to 2 years old, it amazes me how so many parenting books are based on building your child's self-esteem. Well, sorry, your child is born, your child is only self-esteem, nothing else. You know, they for their survival.
Children do not have self-esteem when they're born. Children barely have any self-awareness at all when they're born. What in the and also pause game, incredible pause game here. But yeah, why these two boomers have no idea what they're talking about? This is incredible.
They have to be. So it's not the adult's job to build the child's self-esteem as if that's something we can put on them. It's part of your child's interaction with life, with the environment, in relationships.
Wait, so we can't influence that or impact that at all? Like, we shouldn't even bother to try and improve a kid's self-esteem? That's our child? What in the world are you even talking about? Or that you might further influence their ability to have, protection against people trying to knock down their self-esteem because you come from a loving home? This is inane. This is so incredibly dumb. This makes no sense. It flies in the face of all established psychological study on this, of which there is immeasurable data. This is so completely crazy to me.
That builds self-esteem. So it might be achievement. It might be, something that you can do, something that you achieve, and then you feel good about yourself. It's not your parents always telling you you're amazing, you're brilliant, and praising them. And so, and also that idea of identity. It's the idea of the self, this thing that you're supposed to be born with. And I don't know what myself is yet, and I'm 63. I'm going to, I don't know.
What the hell is your problem then? By trying to improve, you imply that you are not enough. I disagree. That's only if you consider it from that aspect. There is every possibility that you can come to a point in your life where you feel that where you are is good, but that things could always get better. That is very much a left and liberal and progressive view on not only self and the world. It's not like that. This thing, like when the right tries to push this idea that the left is just painting everything as evil and bad and blah, 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 they miss out on the most important part, which is here are these problems, we can make them better. It isn't necessarily that you have to make things start out from a terrible place. They can start from a good place, but that things can get better. Simple as that, And it's so weird. It's so weird how this has to be like reinforced and pushed all the time.
No, because it changes. It changes according to circumstances. I don't know if I'd be a great person to be on a lifeboat with, for example, and would I be the one that stood up and saved people, helped save others? Would I be so scared? I don't know. I don't know myself.
I do. Why don't you know? The only reason I can think of, like, if you don't know these things is you've never been put into a high-stress situation. Do they think that this is something that's a common shared experience? This is very weird.
And I don't believe there is a fixed self that we move through life with. We're always changing according to our circumstances and our environment, and perhaps we get to know ourselves a bit better.
Wait. If we're changing in accordance to our environment, doesn't that mean then there's a whole lot of external forces that can change it and interfacing within our own subjective sense of whatever?
But we can still fool ourselves. We can still be dishonest about who we are to ourselves. So that idea that the child possesses this innate identity, innate sense of self, it's one of the ways that we now, well, apart from the fact that it's nonsense, the roles have been completely reversed between adult and child. So we are encouraged to see children as wise and as knowing themselves, and that we follow the child. We follow you hear parents say,
Even very supportive parents of transgender children do not talk about it necessarily in that way. I'm sure there's some, but there's a difference between being supportive and patient and simply believing that your child is like the golden child, like a reincarnation of the Buddha. It's very, very weird. If you take it to this extreme, then I guess you can make this argument that maybe 20 people on the planet are having, sure.
I've learned far more from my child than they've ever learned from me. Well, that's the wrong way round. You are the adult. You are the one that's gathered life experience and hopefully some wisdom. And again, to put that that responsibility onto a child to be the all-knowing fount of wisdom. And we do that to teenagers as well. But when you look at the adolescent...
Who in the world does that to a teenager? That is a recipe for disaster. Do you know many teenagers?
Yes. that identity formation becomes really the adolescent's job. Who am I? So I'm not a child anymore. I'm developing into an adult. Who am I? What teenagers do is they find their tribe, and in a way they integrate before they can individuate, because they find the tribe and they wear the same and they speak the same language and they like the same music, or now YouTube videos, and the rules that, we may mock this. I've heard people mock it, but it's absolutely right that, it's a stage of development. And now the only tribe that you might describe as any kind of counterculture is trans, having a gender and sexual identity. And there is no other tribe that children can join to show that they don't conform, or that they're a bit different, or that, it's only...
Okay. I am barely able to comprehend what she's trying to say in this, because she has taken something that is so broad and made very strong conclusions based on her own very narrow perspective, which I don't think is very informed. Like, this is yeah, honestly, what the fuck? If at all children and teenagers get belittled more than anything, I agree. Now, I will kind of agree that, trans is a counterculture, sort of. I hate to call it a culture, but her claim that this is like non-conforming and edgy or something is wildly inaccurate. I have friends that have children in middle school and in high school, and at least here in Eugene, it is not counterculture or outside the norm for kids to express themselves in ways that are not like stern gender roles. Not necessarily trans, although some are, but non-binary, or just simply expressing themselves the way they want to express themselves. It might be very different from how other people used to do it. And the schools overwhelmingly embrace these people, which is good. I'm sure it's not like that in many, many places around the country. But, the reason I say this is that it doesn't have to be. And it seems like she wants it to have to be in this like very narrow way to argue what she's arguing. Also, this woman's haircut is awful.
Gender identity now. So if you want to be seen as boring and conventional and traditional and conservative and everything that a teenager doesn't want to appear to be, then you have to join that tribe and at least say, "Oh, I'm non-binary," or to.
Oh, that's why kids do that. Oh, okay, yeah, that's good. Just nullify any other purposes or reasons why they might do so. Okay.
To be able to show that side of yourself, unless you're really comfortable in the idea that you're conventional and you don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, well, that means that they've captured.
Okay, I really have to point this out. The overwhelming majority of kids are conventional. I hate to use that word, but you know what I mean. You guys can forgive me for this one. Are conventional. And that's reflected in the stats, because they don't identify as trans. And in fact, trans are a very small percentage, but for some reason you guys have to make them this big issue instead of just leave them alone. Like the misunderstandings and the pushing of these grotesque talking points are one of the reasons why this is such an issue. Because otherwise, if we actually responded to this as to the percentage of how many people it even affects, nobody would be talking about it. They'd just be leaving these people alone to live their lives however they see fit. It's the right wing, this guy, and people like him that make this an issue because they don't like it. That's it. That's it. There's nothing more to it than that. Like, I can give you an example, and I will maybe near the end here, but yeah, let's see what Jordan's going to say to this.
So, I'll go in two directions with regard to what you said. Years ago, I did a study with a colleague of mine at Harvard on when tattooing and piercing first entered the cultural scene. And we were curious about whether that was a marker for psychopathology or what was predicting the adoption of these new fashion trends. And what we found overwhelmingly was that it wasn't associated with an increased prevalence of mental illness. It was associated with high trait openness. And that's the creativity dimension from the Big Five trait.
Wow. So you were like, why are these children getting tattoos and piercings? Are they psychopaths? Oh, they're just being expressive. Weird. Wow. Okay.
Openness. And when you see people with rainbow-colored hair or multicolored hair and piercings and so forth, you're looking at people who are on the creative end of the distribution.
Okay.
And the point you're making is in part that the collapse of the entire domain of nonconformity into gender identity also entices the creative kids. Creative kids have...
what a fascinating and stupid argument. Because everybody's cool with the piercings and the colored hair, that's why the kids are going trans. It's so gross. So gross. However, I'll make this argument. As we become less judgmental as a people in this world, where, okay, have your piercings, hey, have your tattoos, whatever, wear your fancy colored hair and wild stuff. Kids wanting to express themselves and innovate might open them up to experimenting with non-binary sort of expressions, clothing styles, the way that they kind of view the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. If like the very real psychological urge to be innovative or creative and learn ways to express yourself, it's now safer for people to also express themselves and see where their identity is going to go. I don't think that that's wrong because they'll figure it out. They will. Maybe they are non-binary. Maybe, they end up just kind of settling into a more traditional sense of expression. Maybe they'll discover something about themselves that they didn't know. And I don't think that there's a problem with that. Why would that be an issue? Just let people be people. And if they have a safe way to experiment to find the way to be the happiest version of themselves, why would anybody in the world ever want to stop that? Why? Unless it's to either be cruel or because you feel icky about it. I don't want to watch any more of this video. I want to instead just simply reiterate something that I was reading. Maybe I was watching it in a video. I think maybe Big Joel talked about it. No, Dan Arrows. Dan Arrows is talking about it in one of his videos. In the state of Utah, lawmakers in Utah wanted to pass a ban on transgender sports in high schools. What they found was inside the state schools, there's millions of children, 4 openly identified as transgender. 1 participated in schools, or school sports. 1. Not 400 trans kids, 4 trans kids. And 1 in sports. And they passed a bill. They took taxpayer money, months of deliberation, to make a rule so 1 child could not play sports. There is no reason for this, for all of this shit in the world that is constantly happening when they're talking about trans people, except hatred, cruelty. That's it. There is no point. And cloaking it in, to be totally blunt and honest, a gross misrepresentation of the very field that he himself has worked in for decades is pathetic. It's pathetic, and nobody should be listening to this dude anymore. And whatever is going on with that lady, I think she's even worse. It's really crazy. I don't know how you get to be that old and not even have your own sense of self, but it's not worth it to take it out on other people. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. This was terrible. Trans rights are human rights. Yeah.